The second source of our UU living tradition is words and deeds of prophetic women and men, which challenge us to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. Earlier this summer, when I spoke of our second and sixth principles, I noted that they both contain the word justice. And I talked to you about famous UUs who have prophetic words and deeds. The list is long, and here is a short version. Mary Wollstonecraft, Benjamin Franklin, Susan B. Anthony, Emerson, Thoreau, Clara Barton, plus founders and co-founders of the Humane Society, the ACLU, the NAACP, and Planned Parenthood. But rather than review their heroic words and deeds this morning, I want to focus on the second half of the source, the challenge to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. There is a difference between being prophetic and political. In contested political seasons like this one, the difference gets blurred. At times, conversations around here can sound like we are a political action committee, but we are not. Political institutions are strategic. Their first focus is winning. Prophetic institutions are idealistic, regardless of victory or defeat. A religious institution in the United States of America is prohibited from being political. When I look at the types of religious institutions, I see three types: the evangelical, the faithful, and the prophetic. Now, all traditions are a combination of these three elements, but one element tends to dominate. Evangelical institutions see their mission as to win converts and to grow their religion. Faithful institutions stay true to the tradition and doctrine, like Orthodox Judaism or Orthodox Christianity. Prophetic religious traditions call for a new way of seeing and being and acting in the world. Our tradition has stood in the prophetic tradition. But this was not always so. Universalism has some of its roots in pacifist traditions of Northern Europe, such as the Mennonites. These traditions focused on a peaceful lifestyle, regardless of the politics surrounding them. These are faithful traditions. Universalism became distinct from those traditions when it became an evangelical tradition seeking converts to its unique doctrine of universal salvation and no hell. And they were quite successful, with circuit riders debating with Methodists and other denominations as they moved west. In this area, 4 churches were established after the Civil War: in Lafayette, in Brookston, in Dayton, and Fincastle, which is south of Crawfordsville. The Brookstown and Fincastle church buildings still stand. But the evangelical zeal ran out at the beginning of the 20th century and all these churches closed. Unitarian was also part of the evangelical tradition. As part of the Reformation, they sought to reform orthodoxy and convert people to Unitarianism, the belief that God is one and only God is God. Jesus was not God, but a human that perfectly reflected the image of God. They too were successful in converting people to this idea. Unitarian ideas controlled the theology department at Harvard from 1805 forward. In 1825, William Ellery Channing created Unitarianism as a denomination distinct from Congregationalism. In 1838, Emerson's Harvard Address hijacked the movement and turned it into a prophetic movement. Human rights, freedom of thought, freedom of slaves, freedom of women became paramount. Prophetic movements care less about maintaining institutions. And Unitarianism also declined. Their decline was slower than Universalism because being centered around Harvard, they were closer to the seats of power in this country and had more presidents and more people in social power, and so they had farther to fall. These, both Unitarian and Universalism, declined at the beginning of the 20th century. The Unitarians added humanism to their debate between Christianity and transcendentalism, so they were just too contentious to anybody to really want to join that mess. The battle was no longer theism versus pantheism, it was now theism versus atheism versus pantheism. And the Universalists celebrated the 100th anniversary of the Winchester Confession in 1903. And they essentially had evolved from an evangelical tradition. They had grown to be a major denomination and became a faithful tradition. Mainstream churches, such as Methodists and Presbyterians and Episcopals, had really stopped preaching hellfire as much and were emphasizing God's love. And this made Universalism less distinctive in its message. And they became a dwindling remnant, faithful to their heritage. The humanist wing of Unitarianism became evangelical within the movement. In 1933, they published the first Humanist Manifesto, and they pretty much dominated the denomination after World War II. They started the fellowship movement. They started 500 congregations nationwide, including this one. This congregation in the 60s had one of its first ministers was E.O. Wilson, who was a founder of the Humanist magazine. He left here to edit a magazine which was the main word of the spread of humanism around the country. And Universalism was also influenced by humanism. The responsive reading we read today by Clinton Lee Scott, where it says it's easier to venerate prophets than to live by their human impulses and human achievements. He was a Universalist who who successfully moved the Universalist tradition from being a faithful tradition to be more modern and looking towards the future and to human sensibilities of being a universal religion open to all humanity. And so, Unitarian and Universalism chose to merge in 1961. And almost immediately, this new denomination, Unitarian Universalism, became a prophetic movement. Linus Pauling led the nuclear disarmament movement and won the Nobel Prize. James Reeb and Violet Luiso became civil rights martyrs. We led all religions in promoting women's rights and the rights for sexual minorities. So here we are today, prophets, 3 days from an election. And I know many preachers are violating the principles of separation and church and state. A principle set forth by a self-proclaimed Unitarian and founding father Thomas Jefferson. Many churches on this day are actually telling their flocks who to vote for. They are political. They are focusing on the short term. They want to win at all costs. They are sacrificing their prophetic voice to become a political voice. They cease to become religious institutions and become a political institution. Prophetic institutions champion neither person nor party. We live our ideals, no matter who wins or loses. We will confront powers and structures of evil. We will confront powers. We will seek justice for people striving to be free. We will be compassionate with our foes. No one changes their minds by being called a liar, a racist, or a bigot, or just plain stupid. When people are attacked, they go on the defensive. And sometimes, when we fight, we feel like we're limiting ourselves. Evil uses the lowest tactics and breaks the laws it doesn't like. While good, in order to remain good, must practice the high ideal of equal justice under law. A prophetic faith believes that only just means can lead to a just outcome. And that means that we will lose, and we will lose, and we will lose until we win. Susan B. Anthony is our model for the patient prophet. She never personally won the right to vote, but she worked over half of a century believing to the end that failure is impossible. When she started winning over the mainstream Christian women's associations, that these women of wealth were starting to rebel against her husbands and saying, we should vote. A group of Mormon women wanted to join the Union. And of course, the Christian women were saying, no, we can't have this sect come in. And Susan B. Anthony stood up for them and said, this will not do. Though we might lose popularity, we will lose who we are if we exclude these women and treat them unjustly. So we will include them, or you will lose me. This church had its Black Lives Matter banner. Let me try that again. This church had its Black Lives Matter banner stolen 2 weeks ago. We have replaced it, and after service today, we will march during the postlude outside to watch it unfurl, and then we'll go to our potluck. Because we will be steadfast in that ideal. No matter who wins the election, we will have to hold both candidates to that ideal to make sure it's not forgotten. But when we hold people to that ideal, we have to do it with the transforming power of love. And it's hard to believe in the transforming power of love because the Twitterverse is dominated by the savage tweet. Facebook is dominated by the ridiculing meme. Email is susceptible to the scathing screed. But to gather in community is essential. Human interaction is a place where love has its transforming power. When we take time to talk and to listen, to understand another's perspective, to heal another's wounds, to calm another's fears by assuring each other's safety. Then we are prophets indeed. Courageous in the face of fear, hopeful in the midst of despair, faithful to the end of our days. A bulwark against evil forever. A prophet predicts the future by creating a good and strong foundation on which proceeding generations build. May we bless and be blessed.